The Jewish Blues. Sometime during my 9th year, one of my testicles apparently decided it had had enough of life down in the scrotum and began to make its way north. At the beginning, I could feel it bobbing uncertainly just at the rim of the pelvis and then, as though its moment of indecision had passed, entering the cavity of my body, like a survivor being dragged up out of the sea and over the hull of a lifeboat. And there it nestled, secure at last behind the fortress of my bones, leaving its foolhardy mate to chance it alone in that boy's world of football cleats and picket fences, sticks and stones and pocket knives, all those dangers that drove my mother wild with foreboding, and about which I was warned, and warned, and warned, and warned again, and again, and again. My left testicle took up residence in the vicinity of the inguinal canal. By pressing a finger into the crease between my groin and my thigh, I could still, in the early weeks of its disappearance, feel the curve of its jellied roundness. But then came nights of terror, when I searched my guts in vain, searched all the way up to my rib cage. Alas, the Voyager had struck off for regions uncharted and unknown. Where was it gone to? How high and how far before the journey would come to an end? Would I one day open my mouth to speak in class only to discover my left nut out on the end of my tongue? In school we chanted along with our teacher, "I am the captain of my fate, I am the master of my soul." And meanwhile, within my own body, an anarchic insurrection had been launched by one of my privates, which I was helpless to put down. For some 6 months, until its absence was observed by the family doctor during my annual physical examination, I pondered my mystery, more than once wondering, for there was no possibility that did not enter my head, none, if the testicle could have taken a dive backwards toward the bowel and there begun to convert itself into just such an egg as I had observed my mother yank in a moist yellow cluster from the dark interior of a chicken, whose guts she was emptying into the garbage. What if breasts began to grow on me too? What if my penis went dry and brittle and one day while I was urinating, snapped off in my hand? Was I being transformed into a girl, or worse, into a boy such as I understood from the playground grapevine that Robert Ripley of Believe It or Not would pay a reward of $100,000 for? Believe it or not, there is a 9-year-old boy in New Jersey who is a boy in every way except he can have babies. Who gets the reward? Me or the person who turns me in? Dr. Izzy rolled the scrotal sac between his fingers as though it were the material of a suit he was considering buying, and then told my father that I would have to be given a series of male hormone shots. One of my testicles had never fully descended. Unusual, not unheard of. But if the shots don't work, asked my father in alarm, what then? Here I am sent out into the waiting room to look at a magazine. The shots work. I am spared the knife. Once again. Oh, this father. This kindly, anxious, uncomprehending, constipated father, doomed to be obstructed by this holy Protestant empire. The self-confidence and the cunning, the imperiousness and the contacts, all that enabled the blonde and blue-eyed of his generation to lead, to inspire, to command, if need be, to oppress. He could not summon 100th part of it. How could he oppress? He was the oppressed. How could he wield power? He was the powerless. How could he enjoy triumph when he so despised the triumphant, and probably the very idea? They worship a Jew. Do you know that, Alex? The whole big deal religion is based on worshiping someone who was an established Jew at that time. Now, how do you like that for stupidity? How do you like that for pulling the wool over the eyes of the public? Jesus Christ, who they go around telling everybody was God, was actually a Jew. And this fact that absolutely kills me when I have to think about it, nobody else pays any attention to? That he was a Jew, like you and me, and that they took a Jew and turned him into some kind of god after he's already dead? And then, and this is what can make you absolutely crazy, then the dirty bastards turn around afterwards, and who's the first one on their list to persecute? Who haven't they left their hands off to murder and to hate for 2,000 years? Who? The Jews, who gave them their beloved Jesus to begin with. I assure you, Alex, you are never going to hear such a mishegas of mixed up crap and disgusting nonsense as the Christian religion in your entire life. And that's what these big shots, so-called, believe. Unfortunately, on the home front, contempt for the powerful enemy was not so readily available as a defensive strategy. For as time went on, the enemy was more and more his own beloved son. Indeed, during that extended period of rage that goes by the name of my adolescence, what terrified me most about my father was not the violence I expected him momentarily to unleash upon me, but the violence I wished every night at the dinner table to commit upon his ignorant, barbaric carcass. How I wanted to send him howling from the land of the living when he ate from the serving bowl with his own fork, or sucked the soup from his spoon instead of politely waiting for it to cool, or attempted, God forbid, to express an opinion on any subject whatsoever. And what was especially terrifying about the murderous wish was this: if I tried, chances were I'd succeed. Chances were he would help me along. I would only have to leap across the dinner dishes, my fingers aimed at his windpipe, for him instantaneously to sink down beneath the table with his tongue hanging out. Shout, he could shout. Squabble, he could squabble. And oh, nudge, could he nudge. But defend himself against me? Alex, keep this back talk up, my mother warns, as I depart from the roaring kitchen like Attila the Hun runs screaming from yet another half-eaten dinner. Continue with this disrespect, and you will give that man a heart attack. Good, I cry, slamming in her face the door to my room. Fine, I scream, extracting from my closet the Zeeland jacket I wear only with my collar up, a style she abhors as much as the filthy garment itself. Wonderful, I shout, and with streaming eyes run to the corner to vent my fury on the pinball machine. Christ, in the face of my defiance, if my father had only been my mother, and my mother my father. But what a mix-up of the sexes in our house. Who should by rights be advancing on me? Retreating. And who should be retreating? Advancing. Who should be scolding? Collapsing in helplessness, enfeebled totally by a tender heart. And who should be collapsing? Instead, scolding, correcting, reproving, criticizing, fault-finding without end. Filling the patriarchal vacuum. Oh, thank God, at least he had the cock and the balls. Pregnable, putting it mildly, as his masculinity was in this world of goyim with golden hair and silver tongues, between his legs, God bless my father, he was constructed like a man of consequence. 2 big, healthy balls, such as a king would be proud to put on display, and a schlong of magisterial length and girth. And they were his. Yes, of this I'm absolutely certain. They hung down off of, they were connected on to, they could not be taken away from him. Of course, around the house I saw less of his sexual apparatus than I did of her erogenous zones. And once I saw her menstrual blood. Saw it shining darkly up at me from the worn linoleum in front of the kitchen sink. Just 2 red drops over a quarter of a century ago. But they glow still in that icon of hers that hangs perpetually illuminated in my modern museum of gripes and grievances, along with the box of Kotex and the nylon stockings, which I want to come to in a moment. Also, in this icon is an endless dripping of blood down through a drain board into a dishpan. It's the blood she's draining from the meat so as to make it kosher and fit for consumption. Probably I'm confusing things. I sound like a son of the house of Atreus with all this talk of blood, but I see her standing at the sink, salting the meat so as to rid it of its blood, when the attack of women's trouble sends her, with a most alarming moan, rushing off to her bedroom. I was no more than 4 or 5, and yet those 2 drops of blood that I beheld on the floor of her kitchen are visible to me still, as is the box of Kotex, as are the stockings sliding up her legs, as is, need I even say it, the bread knife with which my own blood would be threatened when I refused to eat my dinner. Ah, that knife. That knife. What gets me is that she herself didn't even consider the use of it anything to be ashamed of, or particularly reticent about. From my bed, I hear her babbling about her problems to the women around the mahjong game. My Alex is suddenly such a bad eater, I have to stand over him with a knife. And none of them apparently finds this tactic of hers at all excessive. I have to stand over him with a knife? And not one of those women gets up from the mahjong table and walks out of her house? Because in their world, that's the way it is with bad eaters. You have to stand over them with a knife. It was years later that she called from the bathroom, "Run to the drugstore. Bring a box of Kotex immediately." And the panic in her voice did I run. And then at home again, breathlessly handed the box to the white fingers that extended themselves at me through a narrow crack in the bathroom door. Though her menstrual troubles eventually had to be resolved by surgery, it's difficult nevertheless to forgive her for having sent me on that mission of mercy. Better she should have bled herself out on our cold bathroom floor. Better that than to have sent an 11-year-old boy in hot pursuit of sanitary napkins. Where was my sister, for Christ's sake? Where was her own emergency supply? Why was this woman so grossly insensitive to the vulnerability of her own little boy? On the one hand, so insensitive to my shame, and yet on the other, so attuned to my deepest desires. I am so small, I hardly know what sex I am, or so you would imagine. It's early in the afternoon, spring of the year 4. Flowers are standing up in purple stalks in the patch of dirt outside our building. With the windows flung open, the air in the apartment is fragrant, soft with the season, and yet electric too with my mother's vitality. She has finished the week's wash and hung it on the line. She has baked a marble cake for our dessert tonight. Beautifully bleeding. There's that blood again. There's that knife again. Anyway, expertly bleeding the chocolate in and out of the vanilla. An accomplishment that seems to me as much of a miracle as getting those peaches to hang there suspended in the shimmering mold of Jell-O. She has done the laundry and baked the cake. She has scrubbed the kitchen and bathroom floors and laid them with newspapers. She has, of course, dusted. Needless to say, she's vacuumed. She has cleared and washed our luncheon dishes, and with my cute little assistant, returned them to their place in the milk cabinet in the pantry. And whistling like a canary all the morning through, a tuneless melody of health and joy, of heedlessness and self-sufficiency. While I crayon a picture for her, she showers, and now in the sunshine of her bedroom, she is dressing to take me downtown. She sits on the edge of the bed in her padded bra and her girdle, rolling on her stockings and chattering away. Who is Mommy's good little boy? Who is the best little boy a Mommy ever had? Who does Mommy love more than anything in this whole wide world? I am absolutely punchy with delight, and meanwhile follow in their tight, slow, agonizingly delicious journey up her legs, the transparent stockings that give her flesh a hue of stirring dimensions. I sidle close enough to smell the bath powder on her throat, also to appreciate better the elastic intricacies of the dangling straps to which the stockings will presently be hooked, undoubtedly with a flourish of trumpets. I smell the oil with which she has polished the 4 gleaming posts of the mahogany bedstead, where she sleeps with a man who lives with us at night and on Sunday afternoons. My father, they say he is. On my fingertips, even though she has washed each one of those little piggies with a warm, wet cloth, I smell my lunch, my tuna fish salad. Might be cunt I'm sniffing. Maybe it is. Oh, I want to growl with pleasure. 4 years old, and yet I sense in my blood, again with the blood, how rich with passion is the moment, how dense with possibility. This fat person with the long hair, whom they call my sister, is away at school. This man, my father, is off somewhere making money as best as he is able. These two are gone, and who knows? Maybe I'll be lucky. Maybe they'll never come back. In the meantime, it's afternoon, it's spring, and for me and me alone, a woman is rolling on her stockings and singing a song of love. Who is going to stay with Mommy forever and ever? Me. Who is it who goes with Mommy wherever in the whole wide world Mommy goes? Why me, of course. What a silly question, but don't get me wrong. I'll play the game. Who had a nice lunch with Mommy? Who goes downtown like a good boy on the bus with Mommy? Who goes into the big store with Mommy? And on and on and on, so that only a week or so ago, upon my safe return from Europe, Mommy had this to say. Feel. What? Even as she takes my hand in hers and draws it toward her body. Mother, I haven't gained 5 pounds, she says, since you were born. Feel, she says, and holds my stiff fingers against the swell of her hips, which aren't bad. And the stockings. More than 25 years have passed. The game is supposed to be over, but Mommy still hitches up the stockings in front of her little boy. Now, however, he takes it upon himself to look the other way when the flag goes fluttering up the pole, and out of concern not just for his own mental health. That's the truth. I look away not for me, but for the sake of that poor man, my father. Yet what preference does father really have? If there in the living room their grown-up little boy were to tumble all at once onto the rug with his mommy, what would Daddy do? Pour a bucket of boiling water on the raging, maddened couple? Would he draw his knife? Or would he go off to the other room and watch television until they were finished? What are you looking away? Asked my mother, amused in the midst of straightening her seams. You'd think I was a 21-year-old girl. You'd think I hadn't wiped your backside and kissed your little tushy for all those years. Look at him. This to my father, in case he hasn't been giving 100% of his attention to the little floor show now being performed. Look, acting like his own mother is some 60-year-old beauty queen. Once a month, my father took me with him down to the Schwitz, there to endeavor to demolish, with the steam and a rub-down and a long, deep sleep, the pyramid of aggravation he has built himself into during the previous weeks of work. Our street clothes we lock away in the dormitory on the top floor, on rows of iron cots running perpendicular to the lockers. The men who have already been through the ringer down below are flung out beneath white sheets like the fatalities of a violent catastrophe. If it were not for the abrupt thunderclap of a fart or the snores sporadically shooting up around me like machine gun fire, I would believe we were in a morgue, and for some strange reason, undressing in front of the dead. I do not look at the bodies, but like a mouse, hop frantically about on my toes, trying to clear my feet of my undershorts before anybody can peek inside, where, to my chagrin, to my bafflement, to my mortification, I always discover in the bottommost seam a pale and wispy brushstroke of my shit. Oh, doctor, I wipe and I wipe and I wipe. I spend as much time wiping as I do crapping, maybe even more. I use toilet paper like it grew on trees, so says my envious father. I wipe until that little orifice of mine is red as a raspberry, but still, much as I would like to please my mother by dropping into her laundry hamper at the end of each day jockey shorts such as might have encased the asshole of an angel, I deliver forth instead. Deliberately, Herr Doctor, or just inevitably? The fetid little drawers of a boy. But here in a Turkish bath, why am I dancing around? There are no women here, no women, and no goyim. Can it be? There is nothing to worry about. Following the folds at the base of his white buttocks, I proceed out of the dormitory and down the metal stairs to that purgatory wherein the agonies that come of being an insurance agent, a family man, and a Jew will be steamed and beaten from my father's body. At the bottom landing, we sidestep a pile of white sheets and a mound of sopping towels. My father pushes a shoulder against a heavy windowless door, and we enter a dark, quiet region redolent of wintergreen. The sounds are of a tiny, unenthusiastic audience applauding the death scene in some tragedy. It's the two masseurs walloping and punching at the flesh of their victims, men half-clad in sheets and stretched out across marble slabs. They smack them and knead them and push them around. They slowly twist their limbs as though to remove them in a piece from their sockets. I am hypnotized, but continue to follow after my father as we pass alongside the pool, a small green cube of heart-stopping ice water, and come at last to the steam room. The moment he pushes open the door, the place speaks to me of prehistoric times, earlier even than the era of the cavemen and lake dwellers that I've studied in school, a time when above the oozing bog that was the earth, swirling white gases choked out the sunlight, and eons passed while the planet was drained for man. I lose touch instantaneously with that ass-licking little boy who runs home after school with his A's in his hand, the little over-earnest innocent endlessly in search of the key to that unfathomable mystery, his mother's approbation, and I'm back in some sloppy, watery time, before there were families such as we know them, before there were toilets and tragedies such as we know them, a time of amphibious creatures, plunging, brainless, hulking things with wet, meaty flanks and steaming torsos. It's as though all the Jewish men ducking beneath the cold dribble of shower off in the corner of the steam room, then lumbering back for more of the thick, dense, suffocating vapors, it's as though they have ridden the time machine back to an age when they existed as some herd of Jewish animals whose only utterance is, "Ugh, ugh." For this is the sound they make as they drag themselves from the shower into the heavy gush of fumes. They appear at long last, my father and his fellow sufferers, to have returned to the habitat in which they can be natural, a place without goyim and women. I stand at attention between his legs as he coats me from head to toe with a thick lather of soap, and I with admiration the baggy substantiality of what overhangs the marble bench upon which he's seated. His scrotum is like the long, wrinkled face of some old man with an egg tucked into each of his sagging jowls, while mine might hang from the wrist of some little girl's dolly like a teeny pink purse. And as for his schlong, to me, with that fingertip of a prick that my mother likes to refer to in public, once, okay, but that once will last a lifetime. As my little thing, his schlong brings to mind the fire hoses coiled along the corridors at school. Schlong. The word somehow catches exactly the brutishness, the meatishness that I admire so. The sheer mindless, weighty, and unself-conscious dangle of that living piece of hose through which he passes streams of water as thick and as strong as rope, while I deliver forth slender yellow threads that my euphemistic mother calls a cis. A cis, I think, is undoubtedly what my sister makes, little yellow threads that you can sew with. "Do you want to make a nice cis?" she asked me. "When I want to make a torrent, I want to make a flood. I want, like he does, to shift the tides of the toilet bowl." "Jack," my mother calls to him, "would you close that door, please? Some example you're setting for you-know-who." But if only that had been so, Mother. If only you-know-who could have found some inspiration in what's-his-name's coarseness. If only I could have nourished myself upon the depths of his vulgarity, instead of that, too, becoming a source of shame, shame, and shame, and shame, and shame. Every place I turn, something else to be ashamed of. We're in my Uncle Nate's clothing store on Springfield Avenue in Newark. I want a bathing suit with a built-in athletic support. I'm 11 years old, and that's my secret. I want a jock. I know not to say anything. I just know to keep my mouth shut, but then how do you get it if you don't ask for it? Uncle Nate, a spiffy dresser with a mustache, removes from his showcase a pair of little boys' trunks, the exact style I have always worn. He indicates that this is the best suit for me, fast-drying, and won't chafe. "What's your favorite color?" Uncle Nate asks. "Maybe you want it in your school color, huh?" I turn scarlet, though that is not my answer. I don't want that kind of suit anymore, and oh, I can smell humiliation in the wind, hear it rumbling in the distance. Any minute now, it's going to crash upon my prepubescent head. "Why not?" my father asked. "Didn't you hear your uncle? This is the best. I want one with a jock strap in it." "Oh, yes, sir. This just breaks my mother up." "For your little thing?" she asks with an amused smile. "Yes, Mother. Imagine. For my little thing." The potent man in the family, successful in business, tyrannical at home, was my father's oldest brother, Jaime, the only one of my aunts and uncles to have been born on the other side and to talk with an accent. Uncle Jaime was in the soda business, butler and distributor of a sweet carbonated drink called Squeeze, the vin ordinaire of our dinner table. With his neurasthenic wife Clara, his son Harold, and his daughter Marcia, my uncle lived in a densely Jewish section of Newark on the second floor of a two-family house that he owned, and into whose bottom floor we moved in 1941, when my father transferred to the Essex County office of Boston and Northeastern. We moved from Jersey City because of the anti-Semitism. Just before the war, when the Bund was feeling its oats, the Nazis used to hold their picnics in a beer garden only blocks from our house. When we drove by in the car on Sundays, my father would curse them loud enough for me to hear, not quite loud enough for them to hear. Then one night, a swastika was painted on the front of our building. Then, a swastika was found carved into the desk of one of the Jewish children in Hannah's class. And Hannah herself was chased home from school one afternoon by a gang of boys who it was assumed were anti-Semites on a rampage. My parents were beside themselves. But when Uncle Jaime heard the stories, he had to laugh. "This surprises you? Living surrounded on four sides by Goyim, and this surprises you? The only place for a Jew to live is among Jews. Especially," he said, with an emphasis whose significance did not entirely escape me, "especially when children are growing up with people from the other sex." Uncle Jaime liked to lord it over my father and took a certain pleasure in pointing out that in Jersey City, only the building we lived in was exclusively Jewish, whereas in Newark, where he still lived, that was the case with the entire Weequahic neighborhood. In my cousin Marcia's graduating class from Weequahic High, out of the 250 students, there were only 11 Goyim and 1 colored. "Go be that," said Uncle Jaime. So my father, after much deliberation, put in for a transfer back to his native village, and although his immediate boss was reluctant to lose such a dedicated worker, and naturally shelved the request, my mother eventually made a long-distance phone call on her own to the home office up in Boston, and following a mix-up that I don't even want to begin to go into, The request was granted. In 1941, we moved to Newark. Harold, my cousin, was short and bullish in build like all the men in our family, except me, and bore a strong resemblance to the actor John Garfield. My mother adored him and was always making him blush, a talent the lady possesses, by saying in his presence, "If a girl had Heschler's dark lashes, believe me, she'd be in Hollywood with $1 million contract." In a corner of the cellar, across from where Uncle Jaime had cases of squeeze piled to the ceiling, Heshy kept a set of York weights with which he worked out every afternoon before the opening of the track season. He was one of the stars of the team and held a city record in the javelin throw. His events were discus, shot, and javelin, though once, during a meet at school stadium, he was put in by the coach to run the low hurdles as a substitute for a sick teammate, and in a spill at the last jump, fell and broke his wrist. My Aunt Clara at that time, or was it all the time, was going through one of her nervous seizures. In comparison to Aunt Clara, my own vivid mama is a Gary Cooper. And when Heshy came home at the end of the day with his arm in a cast, she dropped in a faint to the kitchen floor. Heshy's cast was later referred to as the straw that broke the camel's back, whatever that meant. To me, Heshy was everything. That is, for the little time I knew him. I used to dream that I, too, would someday be a member of the track team and wear scant white shorts with a slit cut up either side to accommodate the taut and bulging muscles of my thighs. Just before he was drafted into the Army in 1943, Heshy decided to become engaged to a girl named Alice Demboski, the head drum majorette of the high school band. It was Alice's genius to be able to twirl not just one, but 2 silver batons simultaneously, to pass them over her shoulders, glide them snakily between her legs, and then toss them 15 and 20 feet into the air, catching one, then the other, behind her back. Only rarely did she drop a baton to the turf, and then she had a habit of shaking her head petulantly and crying out in a little voice, "Oh, Alice." That only could have made Heshy love her the more. It surely had that effect upon me. "Oh, Alice," with that long blonde hair leaping up her back and about her face, cavorting with such exuberance half the length of the playing field. "Oh, Alice," in her tiny white skirt with the white satin bloomers and the white boots that come midway up the muscle of her lean, strong calves. Oh, Jesus. Legs Domboski in all her dumb, blonde, Goyish beauty. Another icon. That Alice was so blatantly a shiksa caused no end of grief in Heshy's household, and even in my own. As for the community at large, I believe there was actually a kind of civic pride taken in the fact that a Gentile could have assumed a position of such high visibility in our high school, whose faculty and student body were about 95% Jewish. On the other hand, when Alice performed what the loudspeaker described as her pièce de résistance, twirling a baton that had been wrapped at either end in oil-soaked rags and then set afire, despite all the solemn applause delivered by the week-wake fans in tribute to the girl's daring and concentration, despite the grave boom, boom, boom of our bass drum and the gasps and shrieks that went up when she seemed about to set ablaze her 2 adorable breasts, despite this genuine display of admiration and concern, I think there was still a certain comic detachment experienced on our side of the field, grounded in the belief that this was precisely the kind of talent that only a goy would think to develop in the first place. Which was, more or less, the prevailing attitude toward athletics in general, and football in particular, among the parents in the neighborhood. It was for the goyim. Let them knock their heads together for glory, for victory in a ball game. As my Aunt Clara put it, that taut violin string voice of hers, "Heshy, please, I do not need goyish nachas." Didn't need, didn't want, such ridiculous pleasures and satisfactions as made the Gentiles happy. At football, our Jewish high school was notoriously hopeless, though the band, may I say, was always winning prizes and commendations. Our pathetic record was, of course, a disappointment to the young, no matter what the parents might feel. And yet, even as a child, one was able to understand that for us to lose at football was not exactly the ultimate catastrophe. Here, in fact, was a cheer that my cousin and his buddies used to send up from the stands at the end of a game in which Weequahic had once again met with seeming disaster. I used to chant it with them. Ikey, Mikey, Jake, and Sam, we're the boys who eat no ham. We play football, we play soccer, we keep matzahs in our locker. I, Weequahic High. So what if we had lost? It turned out we had other things to be proud of. We ate no ham. We kept matzahs in our lockers. Not really, of course, but if we wanted to, we could. And we weren't ashamed to say that we actually did. We were Jews, and we weren't ashamed to say it. We were Jews, and not only were we not inferior to the Goyim who beat us at football, but the chances were that because we could not commit our hearts to victory in such a thuggish game, we were superior. We were Jews, and we were superior. White bread, rye bread, pumpernickel, challah. All those for Weequahic, stand up and holla. Another cheer I learned from Cousin Hesh. 4 more lines of poetry to deepen my understanding of the injustices we suffered. The outrage, the disgust inspired in my parents by the Gentiles was beginning to make some sense. The Goyim pretended to be something special, while we were actually their moral superiors. And what made us superior was precisely the hatred and the disrespect they lavished so willingly upon us. Only what about the hatred we lavished upon them? And what about Heshi and Alice? What did that mean? When all else failed, Rabbi Warshaw was asked to join with the family one Sunday afternoon to urge our Heshi not to take his young life and turn it over to his own worst enemy. I watched from behind a shade in the living room as the rabbi strode impressively up the front stoop in his big black coat. He had given Heshi his bar mitzvah lessons, and I trembled to think that one day he would give me mine. He remained in consultation with the defiant boy and the blighted family for over an hour. Over an hour of his time, they all said later, as though that alone should have changed Heshi's mind. But no sooner did the rabbi depart than the flakes of plaster began falling once again from the ceiling overhead. A door flew open, and I ran for the back of the house to crouch down behind the shade in my parents' bedroom. There was Heshi into the yard, pulling at his own black hair. Then came bald Uncle Jaime, one fist shaking violently in the air like Lenin he looked. And then the mob of aunts and uncles and elder cousins swarming between the two so as to keep them from grinding one another into a little heap of Jewish dust. One Saturday, early in May, after competing all day in a statewide track meet in New Brunswick, Heshi got back to the high school around dusk and went immediately across to the local hangout to telephone Alice and tell her that he had placed 3rd in the state in the javelin throw. She told him that she could never see him again as long as he lived, and hung up. At home, Uncle Jaime was ready and waiting. What he had done, he said, Heshi had forced him to do. What his father had had to do that day, Harold had brought down himself upon his own stubborn, stupid head. It was as though a blockbuster had finally fallen upon Newark. So terrifying was the sound that broke on the stairway. Hesh came charging out of his parents' apartment, down the stairs, past our door, and into the cellar, and one long boom rolled after him. We saw later that he had ripped the cellar door from its topmost hinge with the force of a shoulder that surely seemed from the piece of evidence to be at least the 3rd most powerful shoulder in the state. Beneath our floorboards, the breaking of glass began almost immediately as he hurled bottle after bottle of squeeze from one dark end of the whitewashed cellar to the other. When my uncle appeared at the top of the cellar steps, Heshi raised a bottle over his head and threatened to throw it in his father's face if he advanced so much as a step down the stairway. Uncle Jaime ignored the warning and started after him. Heshy now began to race in and out between the furnaces to circle and circle the washing machines, still wielding the bottle of squeeze. But my uncle stalked him into a corner, wrestled him to the floor, and held him there until Heshy had screamed his last obscenity. Held him there, as Portnoy legend has it, 15 minutes, until the tears of surrender at last appeared on his, Heshy's, long, dark Hollywood lashes. We are not a family that takes defection lightly. That morning, Uncle Jaime had telephoned Alice Demboski in the basement flat of an apartment building on Goldsmith Avenue, where her father was the janitor, and told her that he wanted to meet her by the lake in Weequahic Park at noon. It was a very urgent matter involving Harold's health. He could not talk at length on the phone, as even Mrs. Portnoy didn't know all the facts. At the park, he drew the skinny blonde wearing the babushka into the front seat of the car, and with the windows rolled up, told her that his son had an incurable blood disease, a disease about which the poor boy himself did not even know. That was his story. Bad blood. Make of it what you will. It was the doctor's orders that he should not marry anyone ever. How much longer Harold had to live, no one really knew. But as far as Mr. Portnoy was concerned, he did not want to inflict the suffering that was to come upon an innocent young person like herself. To soften the blow, he wanted to offer the girl a gift, a little something that she could use however she wished. Maybe even to help her find somebody new. He drew from his pocket an envelope containing 5 $20 bills. And dumb, frightened Alice Demboski took it, thus proving something that everybody but Heshy and I had surmised about the Pollock from the beginning, that her plan was to take Heshy for all his father's money and then ruin his life. When Heshy was killed in the war, the only thing people could think to say to my Aunt Clara and my Uncle Jaime, to somehow mitigate the horror, to somehow console them in their grief, was, "At least he didn't leave you with a shiksa wife. At least he didn't leave you with Goyisha children." End of Heshy and his story. Even if I consider myself too much of a big shot to set foot inside a synagogue for 15 minutes, which is all he's asking, at least I should have respect enough to change into decent clothes for the day and not make a mockery of myself, my family, and my religion. I'm sorry. I mumble. My back, as is usual, all I will offer him to look at while I speak. But just because it's your religion doesn't mean it's mine. What did you say? Turn around, mister. I want the courtesy of a reply from your mouth. I don't have a religion, I say, and obligingly turn in his direction about a fraction of a degree. You don't, huh? I can't. And why not? You're something special? Look at me! You're somebody too special? I don't believe in God. Get out of those dungarees, Alex. Put on some decent clothes. They're not dungarees. They're Levi's. It's Rosh Hashanah, Alex. And to me, you're wearing overalls. Get in there and put a tie on and a jacket on and a pair of trousers and a clean shirt and come out looking like a human being. And shoes, mister. Hard shoes. My shirt is clean. Oh, you're riding for a fall, Mr. Big. You're 14 years old, and believe me, you don't know everything there is to know. Get out of those moccasins. What the hell are you supposed to be? Some kind of Indian? Look, I don't believe in God, and I don't believe in the Jewish religion, or in any religion. They're all lies. Oh, they are they? I'm not going to act like these holidays mean anything when they don't, and that's all I'm saying. Maybe they don't mean anything because you don't know anything about them, Mr. Big Shot. What do you know about the history of Rosh Hashanah? One fact. Two facts, maybe. What do you know about the history of the Jewish people that you have a right to call their religion that's been good enough for people a lot smarter than you and a lot older than you for 2,000 years that you can call all that suffering and heartache a lie? There is no such thing as God, and there never was, and I'm sorry, but in my vocabulary, that's a lie. Then who created the world, Alex? He asks contemptuously. It just happened, I suppose, according to you. Alex, says my sister, all Daddy means is even if you don't want to go with him, if you would just change your clothes. But for what? I scream. For something that never existed? Why don't you tell me to go outside and change my clothes for some alley cat or some tree, because at least they exist? But you haven't answered me, Mr. Educated Wise Guy, my father says. Don't try to change the issue. Who created the world and the people in it? Nobody. Right, nobody. Oh, sure, says my father. That's brilliant. I'm glad I didn't get to high school if that's how brilliant it makes you. Alex, my sister says, and softly, as is her way, softly, because she is already broken a little bit too. Maybe if you just put on a pair of shoes. But you're as bad as he is, Hannah. If there is no God, what do shoes have to do with it? One day a year, you ask him to do something for you, and he's too big for it, and that's the whole story, Hannah, of your brother, of his respect and love. Daddy, he's a good boy. He does respect you. He does love you. And what about the Jewish people? He's shouting now and waving his arms, hoping that this will prevent him from breaking into tears, because the word love has only to be whispered in our house for all eyes immediately to begin to overflow. Does he respect them? Just as much as he respects me. Just about as much. Suddenly he is sizzling. He turns on me with another new and brilliant thought. Tell me something. Do you know Talmud, my educated son? Do you know history? 1, 2, 3, you were bar mitzvah, and that for you was the end of your religious education. Do you know men study their whole lives in the Jewish religion, and when they die, they still haven't finished? Tell me, now that you're all finished at 14 being a Jew, do you know a single thing about the wonderful history and heritage of the saga of your people? But there are already tears on his cheeks, and more are on the way from his eyes. A's in school, he says, but in life, he's as ignorant as the day he was born. Well, it looks as though the time has come at last, so I say it. It's something I've known for a little while now. You're the ignorant one. You. Alex, cries my sister, grabbing for my hand as though fearful I may actually raise it against him. But he is, with all that stupid saga shit. Quiet, still, enough, cries Hannah. Go to your room. While my father carries himself to the kitchen table, his head sunk forward and his body doubled over, as though he had just taken a hand grenade in his stomach. Which he has. Which I know. You can wear rags for all I care. You can dress like a peddler. You can shame and embarrass me all you want. Curse me, Alexander. Defy me. Hit me. Hate me. The way it usually works. My mother cries in the kitchen. My father cries in the living room, hiding his eyes behind the Newark News. Hannah cries in the bathroom. And I cry on the run between our house and the pinball machine at the corner. But on this particular Rosh Hashanah, everything is disarranged. And why my father is crying in the kitchen instead of my mother, why he sobs without protection of the newspaper and with such pitiful fury, is because my mother is in a hospital bed recovering from surgery. This indeed accounts for his excruciating loneliness on this Rosh Hashanah and his particular need of my affection and obedience. But at this moment in the history of our family, if he needs it, you can safely bet money that he's not going to get it from me. Because my need is not to give it to him. Oh, yes, we'll turn the tables on him all right, won't we, Alex, you little prick? Yes, Alex, the little prick, finds that his father's ordinary day-to-day vulnerability is somewhat aggravated by the fact that the man's wife, or so they tell me, has very nearly expired. And so Alex, the little prick, takes the opportunity to drive the dagger of his resentment just a few inches deeper into what is already a bleeding heart. Alexander the Great. No, there's more here than just adolescent resentment and Oedipal rage. There's my integrity. I will not do what Heshy did, for I go through childhood convinced that had he only wanted to, my powerful cousin Heshy, the third best javelin thrower in all New Jersey, an honor, I would think, rich in symbolism for this growing boy with visions of jockstraps dancing in his head, could easily have flipped my 50-year-old uncle over onto his back and pinned him to the cellar door. So then, I conclude, he must have lost on purpose. But why? For he knew, I surely knew it even as a child, that his father had done something dishonorable. Was he then afraid to win? But why? When his own father had acted so vilely and in Heshy's behalf? Was it cowardice? Fear? Or perhaps it was Heshy's wisdom? Whenever the story is told of what my uncle was forced to do to make my dead cousin see the light, or whenever I have cause to reflect upon the event myself, I sense some enigma at its center, a profound moral truth, which, if only I could grasp, might save me and my own father from some ultimate but unimaginable confrontation. Why did Heshy capitulate? And should I? But how can I and still remain true to myself? Oh, but why don't I just try? Give it a little try, you little prick. So don't be so true to yourself for half an hour. Yes, I must give in. I must. Particularly as I know all my father has been through, what minute-by-minute misery there's been for him during these tens of thousands of minutes it's taken the doctors to determine, first, that there was something growing in my mother's uterus, and second, whether the growth they finally located was malignant, whether what she had was... Oh, that word we cannot even speak in one another's presence, the word we cannot even spell out in all its horrible entirety. The word we allude to only by the euphemistic abbreviation that she herself supplied us with before entering the hospital for her tests. C, A, and Ganook. The N, the C, the E, the R, we don't need to hear to frighten us to kingdom come. How brave she is, all our relatives agree, just to utter those two letters. And aren't there enough whole words as it is to whisper at each other behind closed doors? There are. Ugly and cold little words reeking of the ether and alcohol of hospital corridors, words with all the appeal of sterilized surgical instruments, words like smear and biopsy. And then there are the words that furtively, at home alone, I used to look up in the dictionary just to see them there in print, the hard evidence of that most remote of all realities. Words like vulva and vagina and cervix, words whose definitions will never again serve me as a source of illicit pleasure. And then there is that word we wait and wait and wait to hear, the word whose utterance will restore to our family what now seems to have been the most wonderful and satisfying of lives, that word that sounds to my ear like Hebrew, like B'nai or Bruch, benign. Benign. Baruch atah Adonai, let it be benign. Blessed art thou, O Lord, our God, let it be benign. Hear, O Israel, and shine down thy countenance, and the Lord is one, and honor thy father, and honor thy mother, and I promise, I will, only let it be benign. And it was. A copy of Dragon Seed by Pearl S. Buck is open on the table beside the bed, where there's also a half-empty glass of flat ginger ale. It's hot, and I'm thirsty, and my mother, my mind reader, says I should go ahead and drink what's left in her glass. I need it more than she does. But dry as I am, I don't want to drink from any glass to which she has put her lips. For the first time in my life, the idea fills me with revulsion. Take. I'm not thirsty. Look, how you're perspiring. I'm not thirsty. Don't be polite all of a sudden. But I don't like ginger ale. You? don't like ginger ale? No. Since when? Oh, God. She's alive, and so we're at it again. She's alive, and right off the bat, we're starting in. She tells me how Rabbi Warshaw came and sat and talked with her for a whole half hour before. As she now so graphically puts it, she went under the knife. Wasn't that nice? Wasn't that thoughtful? Only 24 hours out of the anesthetic. And she knows, you see, that I refused to change out of my Levi's for the holiday. The woman who's sharing the room with her, whose loving, devouring gaze I'm trying to edge out of, and whose opinion, as I remember it, nobody had asked for, takes it upon herself to announce that Rabbi Warshaw is one of the most revered men in all of Newark. Revered. 3 syllables, as the rabbi himself would enunciate it in his mighty Anglo-oracular style. I begin to lightly pound at the pocket of my baseball mitt, a signal that I am about ready to go if only someone will let me. He loves baseball. He could play baseball 12 months a year, my mother tells Mrs. Revere-Red. I mumble that I have a league game. It's the finals for the championship. Okay, says my mother, and lovingly, you came, you did your duty, now run. Run to your league game. I can hear in her voice how happy and relieved she is to find herself alive on this beautiful September afternoon. And isn't it a relief for me, too? Isn't this what I prayed for to a God I do not even believe is there? Wasn't the unthinkable thing life without her to cook for us, to clean for us, to everything for us? This is what I prayed and wept for, that she should come out at the other end of her operation and be alive, and then come home to be once again our one and only mother. Run, my baby boy, my mother croons to me, and sweetly, oh, she can be so sweet and good to me, so motherly. She'll spend hour after hour playing canasta with me when I'm sick and in bed, as she is now. Imagine the ginger ale the nurse has brought for her because she has had a serious operation she offers to me because I'm overheated. Yes, she will give me the food out of her mouth. That's a proven fact. And still, I will not stay 5 full minutes at her bedside. Run, says my mother, while Mrs. Revered, who in no time at all has managed to make herself my enemy, and for the rest of my life, Mrs. Revered says, soon mother will be home. Soon everything will be just like ordinary. Sure, run, run. They all run these days, says the kind and understanding lady. Oh, they are all so kind and understanding, I want to strangle them. Walking, they never heard of. God bless them. So I run. Do I run? Having spent maybe 2 fretful minutes with her, 2 minutes of my precious time, even though just the day before, the doctor stuck right up her dress, so I imagined it, before my mother reminded me of the knife, our knife, some kind of horrible shovel with which to scoop out what had gone rotten inside her body. They reached up and pulled down out of her just what she used to reach up and pull down out of the dead chicken, and threw it in the garbage can. Where I was conceived and carried, there now is nothing. A void. Poor mother, how can I rush to leave her like this after what she's just gone through? After all she has given me, my very life. How can I be so cruel? Will you leave me, my baby boy? Will you ever leave Mommy? Never, I would answer. Never, never, never. And yet now that she's hollowed out, I cannot even look her in the eye, and have avoided doing so ever since. Oh, there's her pale red hair, spread across the pillow in long strands of springy ringlets that I might never have seen again. There are the faint moons of freckles that she says used to cover her entire face when she was a small child, and that I would never have seen again. And there are those eyes of reddish-brown, eyes the color of the crust of honey cake, and still open, still loving me. There was her ginger ale, and thirsty as I was, I could not have forced myself to drink it. So I ran all right, Out of the hospital and up to the playground and right out to center field, the position I play for a softball team that wears silky blue and gold jackets with the name of the club scrawled in big white felt letters from one shoulder to the other. CB's AC. Thank God for the CB's AC. Thank God for center field. Doctor, you can't imagine how truly glorious it is out there, so alone in all that space. Do you know baseball at all? Because center field is like some observation post, a kind of control tower where you're able to see everything and everyone, to understand what's happening the instant it happens, not only by the sound of the struck bat, but by the spark of movement that goes through the infielders in the first second that the ball comes flying at them. And once it gets beyond them, it's mine, you call, it's mine. And then after it, you go. For in center field, if you can get to it, it is yours. Oh, how unlike my home it is to be in center field, where no one will appropriate unto himself anything that I say is mine. Unfortunately, I was too anxious a hitter to make the high school team. I swung and missed at bad pitches so often during the tryouts for the freshman squad that eventually the ironical coach took me aside and said, "Sonny, are you sure you don't wear glasses?" and then sent me on my way. But did I have form? Did I have style? And in my playground softball league, where the ball came in just a little slower and a little bigger, I am the star I dreamed I might become for the whole school. Of course, still in my ardent desire to excel, I too frequently swing and miss, but when I connect, it goes great distances. Doctor, it flies over fences and is called a home run. Oh, and there is really nothing in life, nothing at all, that quite compares with that pleasure of rounding second base at a nice slow clip, because there's just no hurry anymore, because that ball you've hit has just gone sailing out of sight. And I could feel, too. And the farther I had to run, the better. I got it, I got it, I got it, and tear in toward second to trap in the webbing of my glove, and barely an inch off the ground, a ball driven hard and low and right down the middle. A base hit, someone thought. Or back I go. I got it, I got it. Back easily and gracefully toward that wire fence, moving practically in slow motion, and then that delicious DiMaggio sensation of grabbing it like something heaven sent over one shoulder. Or running, turning, leaping, like little Al Gianfrido, a baseball player, doctor, who once did a very great thing. Or just standing, nice and calm. Nothing trembling, everything serene, standing there in the sunshine, as though in the middle of an empty field or passing the time on the street corner, standing without a care in the world in the sunshine, like my King of Kings, the Lord my God, the Duke himself. Snyder, doctor, that name may come up again. Standing there as loose and as easy, as happy as I will ever be, just waiting by myself under a high fly ball. A towering fly ball, I hear Red Barber say as he watches from behind his microphone, hit out toward Portnoy. Alex, under it, just waiting there for the ball to fall into the glove. I raise to it, and yep, there it is. Pluck! The third out of the inning. And Alex gathers it in for out number 3, and folks, here's old CD for P. Lorillard and Company. And then in one motion, while old Connie brings us a message from old Golds, I start in toward the bench, holding the ball now with the 5 fingers of my bare left hand, and when I get to the infield, having come down hard with 1 foot on the bag at second base, I shoot it gently, with just a flick of the wrist, at the opposing team's shortstop as he comes trotting out onto the field, and still, without breaking stride, go loping in all the way, shoulders shifting, head hanging, touch pigeon-toed, my knees coming slowly up and down in an altogether brilliant imitation of the Duke. Oh, the unruffled nonchalance of that game. There is not a movement that I don't know still down in the tissue of my muscles and the joints between my bones. How to bend over to pick up my glove and how to toss it away. How to test the weight of the bat, how to hold it and carry it and swing it around in the on-deck circle. How to raise that bat above my head and flex and loosen my shoulders and my neck before stepping in and planting my 2 feet exactly where my 2 feet belong in the batter's box. And how, when I take a called strike, which I have a tendency to do, it bounces off nicely swinging at bad pitches, to step out and express, if only through a slight poking with the bat at the ground, just the right amount of exasperation with the powers that be. Yes, every little detail so thoroughly studied and mastered that it's simply beyond the realm of possibility for any situation to arise in which I don't know how to move, or where to move, or what to say or leave unsaid. And it's true, isn't it? Incredible, but apparently true. There are people who feel in life the ease, the self-assurance, the simple and essential affiliation with what's going on that I used to feel as the center fielder for the Seabees. Because it wasn't, you see, that one was the best center fielder imaginable, only that one knew exactly, and down to the smallest particular, how a center fielder should conduct himself. And there are people like that walking the streets of the USA. I ask you, why can't I be one? Why can't I exist now as I existed for the Seabees out there in center field? Oh, to be a center fielder. A center fielder. And nothing more. But I am something more. Or so they tell me. A Jew. No, an atheist, I cry. I am a nothing where religion is concerned, and I will not pretend to be anything that I am not. I don't care how lonely and needy my father is, the truth about me is the truth about me. And I'm sorry, but he'll just have to swallow my apostasy whole. And I don't care how close we came to sitting Shiva for my mother either. Actually, I wonder now if maybe the whole hysterectomy had not been dramatized into C.A. and out of it again solely for the sake of scaring the S.H. out of me. Solely for the sake of humbling and frightening me into being once again an obedient and helpless little boy. And I find no argument for the existence of God or for the benevolence and virtue of the Jews in the fact that the most revered man in all of Newark came to sit for a whole half hour beside my mother's bed. If he emptied her bedpan, if he fed her meals, that might be the beginning of something. But to come for a half an hour and sit beside a bed? What else has he got to do, Mother? To him, uttering beautiful banalities to people scared out of their wits, that is to him what playing baseball is to me. He loves it. And who wouldn't? Mother, Rabbi Warshaw is a fat, pompous, impatient fraud with an absolutely grotesque superiority complex. A character out of Dickens is what he is. Someone who, if you stood next to him on the bus and didn't know he was so revered, you'd say, that man stinks to high heaven of cigarettes, and that is all you would say. This is a man who somewhere along the line got the idea that the basic unit of meaning in the English language is the syllable. So no word he pronounces has less than 3 of them, not even the word God. You should hear the song and dance he makes out of Israel. For him, it's as long as refrigerator. And do you remember him at my bar mitzvah? What a field day he had with Alexander Portnoy? Why, Mother, did he keep calling me by my whole name? Why? Except to impress all you idiots in the audience with all those syllables. And it worked. It actually worked. Don't you understand? The synagogue is how he earns his living, and that is all there is to it. Coming to the hospital to be brilliant about life, syllable by syllable, to people who are shaking in their pajamas about death is his business, just as it is my father's business to sell life insurance. It's what they each do to earn a living, and if you want to feel pious about somebody, Feel pious about my father, goddammit, and bow down to him the way you bow down to that big, fat, comical son of a bitch because my father really works his balls off and doesn't happen to think that he's God's special assistant into the bargain and doesn't speak in those fucking syllables. I want to welcome you to the synagogue. Oh, God. If you're up there shining down your countenance, why not spare us from here on out the enunciation of the rabbis? Why not spare us the rabbis themselves? Look, why not spare us religion, if only in the name of our human dignity? Good Christ, Mother, the whole world knows already, so why don't you? Religion is the opiate of the people. And if believing that makes me a 14-year-old communist, then that's what I am, and I'm proud of it. I'd rather be a communist in Russia than a Jew in a synagogue any day. So I tell my father right to his face, too. Another grenade to the gut is what it turns out to be. I suspected as much. But I'm sorry. I happen to believe in the rights of man, rights such as are extended in the Soviet Union to all people, regardless of race, religion, or color. My communism, in fact, is why I now insist on eating with the cleaning lady when I come home for my lunch on Mondays and see that she's still there. I will eat with her mother at the same table and the same food. Is that clear? If I get leftover pot roast warmed up, then she gets leftover pot roast warmed up, and not creamy Munster or tuna either, served on a special glass plate that doesn't absorb her germs. But no, Mother doesn't get the idea, apparently. Too bizarre, apparently. Eat with the Schwarze? What could I be talking about? She whispers to me in the hallway the instant I come in from school. Wait, the girl will be finished in a few minutes. But I will not treat any human being outside my family as inferior. Can't you grasp something of the principle of equality? God damn it. And I tell you, if he ever uses the word nigger in my presence again, I'll drive a real dagger into his fucking bigoted heart. Is that clear to everyone? I don't care that his clothes stink so bad after he comes home from collecting the colored debit that they have to be hung in the cellar to air out. I don't care that they drive him nearly crazy, letting their insurance lapse. That is only another reason to be compassionate, goddammit, to be sympathetic and understanding, and to stop treating the cleaning lady as though she was some kind of mule without the same passion for dignity that other people have. And that goes for the Goyim, too. We all haven't been lucky enough to have been born Jews, you know. So little Rachmanis on the less fortunate, okay? Because I am sick and tired of Goyisha this and Goyisha that. If it's bad, it's the Goyim. If it's good, it's the Jews. Can't you see, my dear parents, from whose loins I somehow leaped, that such thinking is a trifle barbaric? That all you're expressing is your fear? The very first distinction I learned from you, I'm sure, was not night and day or hot and cold, but Goyisha and Jewish. But now it turns out, my dear parents, relatives, and assembled friends who have gathered here to celebrate the occasion of my bar mitzvah, it turns out, you schmucks, you narrow-minded schmucks. Oh, how I hate you for your Jewish, narrow-minded minds, including you, Rabbi Syllable, who have for the last time in your lives sent me out to the corner for another pack of Pall Mall cigarettes from which you reek. In case nobody has ever told you, it turns out that there is just a little bit more to existence than what can be contained in those disgusting and useless categories. And instead of crying over he who refuses at the age of 14 ever to set foot inside a synagogue again, instead of wailing for he who has turned his back on the saga of his people, weep for your own pathetic selves. Why don't you? Sucking and sucking on that sour grape of a religion. Jew, 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 Jew. It's coming out of my ears already. The saga of the suffering Jews. Do me a favor, my people, and stick your suffering heritage up your suffering ass. I happen also to be a human being. But you are a Jew, my sister says. You're a Jewish boy, more than you know, and all you're doing is making yourself miserable. All you're doing is hollering into the wind. Through my tears, I see her patiently explaining my predicament to me from the end of my bed. If I'm 14, she is 18, and in her first year at Newark State Teachers College, a big, sallow-faced girl oozing melancholy at every pore. Sometimes, with another big, homely girl named Edna Tepper, who has, however, to recommend her, tits the size of my head, she goes to a folk dance at the Newark Y. This summer, she's going to be crafts counselor in the Jewish Community Center day camp. I've seen her reading a paperback book with a greenish cover called A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. All I seem to know about her are these few facts. And, of course, the size and smell of her brassiere and panties. What years of confusion, and when will they be over? Can you give me a tentative date, please? When will I be cured of what I've got? Do you know, she asked me, where you would be now if you had been born in Europe instead of America? That isn't the issue, Hannah. Dead, she says. That isn't the issue. Dead. Gassed or shot or incinerated or butchered or buried alive. Do you know that? And you could have screamed all you wanted that you were not a Jew, that you were a human being and had nothing whatever to do with their stupid suffering heritage, and still you would have been taken away to be disposed of. You would be dead, and I would be dead, but that isn't what I'm talking about. And your mother and your father would be dead, but why are you taking their side? I'm not taking anybody's side, she says. I'm only telling you he's not such an ignorant person as you think. And she isn't either, I suppose. I suppose the Nazis make everything she says and does smart and brilliant too. I suppose the Nazis are an excuse for everything that happens in this house. Oh, I don't know, says my sister. Maybe they are. And now she begins to cry too, and how monstrous I feel, for she sheds her tears for 6 million. Or so I think, while I shed mine only for myself. Or so I think.